Hello friends, thank you again for joining me. Second episode today. I'm calling it the Early Acrylic Glazes, Daily Art Adventure 781. And I think I'll continue, as I did earlier today, I think, working on essentially two paintings at the same time. Very often at this stage of the painting, I would commence to drawing with these pencils, Jerry's Artarama, Jumbo Jet Black. I've talked about those a lot because I use them a lot. But with this woodland scene, again, here's my reference sketch, and here's my reference photo. So it's very much a nature scene. There's not, you know, if I started drawing, it would just be a hodgepodge of vertical lines. So that doesn't make much sense in this particular drawing. So I'm going to, and this is dry now, as you can see during the interim there, I took time to practice my saxophone and practice my trumpet and eat some lunch. Kind of late for lunch, isn't it? I'm on artist schedule today. All right, so I've just put some yellow from this little pot here. Right, that's already about 50% or 60% medium. But I've just added a whole bunch more medium because I want this to be very light. And you should not use too much water, or the whole thing will just disappear. That is if you use water as a medium, gravity will just pull it all the way down off your painting, off your canvas. Ask me how I know that. I've had that happen so many times, not even funny. And then, as you can see, I've added a bunch more. I believe this is GAC 100. The reason I don't know is because I pour acrylic mediums, you know, from one to another to another to another. So just because it says GAC 100 doesn't necessarily mean. Okay, so what I'm doing now is very broad. I actually wouldn't mind having some wider brushes than this, but this will do. For the moment, I'm doing some very broad glazes of color. Of course, that's redundant to say glazes of color, isn't it? But nevertheless, glazes of color. I do find that this is one of the areas where my students, when I'm teaching live, who are usually, you know, more or less traditional oil painters, and in my classes, if I'm teaching the Crazy Dan Nelson method, you know, I'm asking them to do a whole bunch of things that are completely new and very counterintuitive. And this is one of the things that is counterintuitive for so many of my students, and that is to paint in zones. Don't. Now this painting is pretty easy because it's already a zone. But let's say there was a big red caboose. They were doing a painting of a caboose right in the middle of the painting. The student's tendency is to pick up a brush, stick out their tongue, and even with a wide brush, color in the lines. And I would say, no, no, no. Paint in the caboose area, the caboose zone, paint wherever. All right. Now that green, yellow here, and well, it's all run together now, yellow and green. Now comes really one of the most fun parts of my painting technique, I think, which is especially the first, for some reason, the first layer, the first phase, the first stage of opaque white. And again, in the olden days, I used to wait until the acrylic glaze was dry before I would begin painting white. And then I discovered by doing so, I was missing a golden opportunity for some really delightful things. You know what? I should have done some blue up there. Hang on, it's a little bit late, but let me see if I can go ahead and do this. And now I am using water as a glaze, so you're going to see part of what I just was talking about. You're going to see how that blue just runs down. So painting white into wet allows me to, it creates delightful painterly marks. Painterly marks are the very marks that people who are stuck in realism, and not everybody who does realism is stuck in realism, but some people who do realism, in my opinion, are in fact stuck in realism. Some. Anyway, and painterly strokes are the very strokes that those kind of folks, to rhyme with strokes, they're the very kind of marks that those people don't like, are the painterly ones. The fact that I'm painting wet in wet and it's a glorious mess, you know, that's precisely, let me put it another way, that's precisely what drives early journey painters crazy. Those who are still focused on trying to create stuff that looks like stuff. Hang on here, I have to change in-ear monitors. Really enjoying this mess that I'm creating here. Revel in the mess. That's a good word for especially those of you who are struggling to get loose, which is frankly most of us. Revel in the mess. The mess is our friend. Contrary to how all early journey painters feel, right? Because the early journey painters focused on painting stuff that looks like stuff. So for those people, the mess is the enemy. But somehow, if the light bulb can come on, the mess is our friend. I've spoken often, I've taught often on how to paint trees. And here I am painting, of course, a whole forest of trees. So how do you paint a whole forest of trees? In some ways, the way you paint a single tree. It just sort of expanded the principles. And the one word answer, I meant to say, the one word answer to the question, how do you paint trees? If I only get one word, or two words, I'm sorry, the answer is in layers. Okay, so I forget one word, I say layers. All right, that's beautiful. I don't care what you think. I'm here to tell you that's beautiful. it's also a dripping wet mess, a happy mess. Let's graduate to the other painting now. And this is also dry. So back to, hang on a second before I put that up there. Let's wipe off some of the puddle that's collected out here on the tray of my easel. All right. So very different subject matter. Once again, forgive me, I need to take down my makeshift reference holder. And again, if anybody missed my earlier broadcast, here's what I'm painting. A study in white, white on white on white. That rings a bell. And I certainly could do some pencil drawing at this stage of this painting, but since I'm sort of working two paintings in tandem here today, I'm going to do, at least at the moment, I'm going to do essentially the same process on both of them, so as not to confuse myself and maybe confuse you as well. Okay, so this blue, of course, represents sky, and you'll see how carelessly, if you will, I am applying the blue to the sky, not following the outline at all. So, and down here, I'm following the advice that I often give, because this is not exactly a cityscape, but it's like a cityscape in that there's pavement here in the foreground. And I have mentioned often that one of the easiest ways to handle pavement in the foreground is essentially to paint it the same color as the sky. Yes, which, of course, more often than anything else means a blue of some kind. Otherwise, I mean, what color is pavement? Gray, right? And you don't want, generally speaking, I don't think you don't want huge swaths of gray. Or you don't want to think of your painting as being largely about gray. So one of the early steps to take care of that is simply to do the pavement reflecting the color of the sky. Okay, back to white now again. And one difference, big difference I'm going to do from the photograph here, again, there's the photograph. I'm going to make my sky here quite a bit cloudier, more cloudy, larger cloud. Again, partly to serve my secondary goal, secondary purpose of doing a painting that's a study in white. So I don't want a big blue sky up there. I want a lot of white sky, with blue, of course, but not as much as in the photograph. So with this white, I'm doing some slightly careful marks. But a number of decidedly abstract marks as well. I am certainly looking at the reference a great deal here. You can't see my head bobbing up and down, if you will. I am a bobblehead at the moment, looking up and down at the reference, paying a lot of attention to it, because I actually am drawing, if you will, even though it's very abstract and loose. It is drawing nonetheless. You can kind of tell some of those strokes that are just purely abstract, right? I'm assuming you can discern some of that. I didn't mention this on either painting, but when I did these initial glazes, blue on this one, blue, and a little bit of purple, the paint that I'm applying, of course, is picking up the watercolor stick. Do you remember? In the abstract phase, I used these watercolor sticks to make some abstract marks. And then my glaze, of course, enlivens, wettens, is that a word? Makes wet, makes wet those acrylic marks, and they run and they bleed and make all kinds of fascinating marks. And the secret is to not rub over them too often. Let them bleed and blossom and make all kinds of pretty colors. But if you brush twice or 3 times across it, then it just becomes a mess. So don't do that. Forgive me just a moment, and I have to clean. See these brushes. Acrylics are very hard on your brushes, by the way, in case you crazy people who think acrylics are easy to clean up, you're exactly backwards. Oil is easy cleanup. True, it doesn't have any, acrylics don't have any solvent smells, but it's acrylics that ruins your clothes and ruins your brushes and are hard to clean and so on and so forth. And one of the things that students do that makes me go, ah! I keep my teacher poker face on, usually. But you don't leave your brushes sitting in a jar of water. Oh my goodness. Please don't do that. Do not do that, please. All right. Hang on. I'm going to take a picture of this as soon as I find my backup phone. There you go. So bear with me just a minute. Let's take a picture of this at each stage of its development. Okay, good enough. And now it is time for some black pencils. I hope that you can discern by the way that I handle the pencils. I'm sure you can, that my intent is slightly, my goal is to draw, accurately render the subject matter, but that is clearly the secondary purpose, right? Otherwise, some of you, especially if you're a newer viewer, you're looking at me and go, dang, this guy's a bad drawer. Look at the way he holds his drawing tool. He's bad drawer. Yep. Which is to say, nope. I'm a pretty good drawer. People use my name and Rembrandt's. That's an old joke. I've used this joke so many times. You old timers, be quiet. Somebody People use my name and Rembrandt's name in the same sentence all the time. They say, well, he sure ain't no Rembrandt. I'm sorry, laughing at my old joke. What's worse? What's a sign of feeble-mindedness? Not only telling the same joke over and over, but laughing at it over and over. I think the latter of those two is actually a more dangerous sign. Shut up! I'm having fun. I'm entertaining myself. Anyway, you can clearly see, again, any newcomers here, you old timers know all that I'm only partly concerned with accuracy of rendering. I'm much more concerned with interestingness. Can I make up that word? I'm much more concerned about making interesting marks, abstract marks, marks that are fun to look at no matter what they purport, what they supposedly are a drawing of. All right, I really think that's enough of that. So bear with me just a minute, and I'm going to go back to the other painting, and we'll do a little bit of pencil on that as well. Then I'll wrap up this broadcast. I'll keep it short as well. I see you guys chatting up a storm over there, and I'm doing a good job of ignoring you. Sorry about that. Quick second to sharpen these pencils. You want to know a good tip? So these pencils are too big to fit in a pencil sharpener, right? An electric one, so you have to buy this kind of thing. And these are pretty cheap, and they ought to be, but they wear out fairly quickly. So I'll often, when I go into the art store, Jerry's in our town, I'll buy 2 or 3 or 4 of them. $2 each or something like that. And here I have to put my reference page back up. So this painting that I'm working on is the one that I'm going to be paid for, assuming Buddy likes it. That is always the assumption or the hope when you're doing a commission painting, right? All right. So there's some of my reference. And again, I'm still not going to do a ton of drawing here. Did I mention that when you're doing trees, part of my tree class is usually you do not want your trees, especially if they're close to the edge of your painting, you don't want them to be vertical. You want them tilting one way or the other. So this tree is leaning slightly to the left, which is real in the photograph. That's the way it really is. And this one is leaning slightly to the right. Again, the photograph has it leaning to the right, but I've tilted it a little bit more than it is in the photograph. And this is very careful drawing. And again, I think this is obvious. I'm more focused on texture, the purely abstract nature of these marks than I am in accurately rendering. Certainly not accurately rendering. Again, you know, one particular tree. Look at, there's a couple hundred tree trunks in there. And that is the feeling that I want to give. Now there's one big exception to this, and that is that Buddy's dog, Ellie, is in this photograph. And I'm certainly going to include Ellie. So let's get her. And she is when I was dialoguing with Buddy earlier, I accused her of being a, what was the word? I forget, but an irregular golden retriever. Well, Buddy straightened me out, because she's not. She's a golden retriever slash, oh, and I forget now, I think it was a golden lab. Forgive me, Buddy, if I'm getting that right. Some kind of lab mix, and she is a service dog. And I will be drawing her several times before it's over, but that's a good enough start. And if that's Ellie, and that's her shadow, right? Lots of shadows. Let's do some texture on this bark, on this trunk, I mean. Texture on the trunk of that tree. And of course, as you can probably tell, it's a sloppy, wet mess. The whole thing is. It's a wonderful mess. But I'm going to stop right there. Let me look at see what you guys are saying. I hope you're not saying, Dan, your sound's not working. Like we did yesterday. Uncle, thank you for calling me yesterday. Fortunately, I discovered my problem right before you called me. This must be a chatty time of day for you guys. Hello, Monique. Good. Hello, David. I already answered your text. I don't know if you noticed or not. Can you oil paint on top of thin acrylic pour painting? I would think so. Yeah, again. Yeah, some person says when art conservators x-ray your paintings in 100 years, they'll be pleasantly surprised by the underdrawing. That's fun, yeah. Thank you. Hello, Brenda from Australia. Thank you for joining us. Some person is here. That's cute. Do I use more expensive brushes when applying the final layers of acrylic? No. Yes. No. I'm sorry. I don't finish. You're exactly right. But I finish my paintings in oil, not acrylic. So everything, all the acrylic is underpainting. And yes, I do use much better brushes. My favorite ones I go to the most are Silver Grand Prix. And they are good quality and fairly expensive. But I do, yes indeed, use good brushes late in the process. Very good question. Imagine me ranting at 165. Won't that be fun? That's right. Do I make my own Christmas cards? I certainly have. And yeah, that's sure. And many varied, originals, calligraphy, and so on. But yeah, I have done that many times over the years. Uncle's leaving us to go watch some infuriating politics on TV. Yep. Do I ever feel like putting Bigfoot? Yes. Not in this painting. It's a commission. So I don't do silly things like that in a commission. But it would be fun, wouldn't it? Yeah, a long story. Yeah, and when I'm painting for myself, I'm tempted and sometimes yield to the temptation to put funny little things. I will bring you in for a minute because somebody mentioned the fact that the messy underpainting does in fact give the illusion of detail later on. And so let me just zoom in so you can see some of it. Of course, that red mark there is purely abstract. That doesn't represent, you know, the roof of a house or anything like that. That will be diminished, but will still have some impact later. So, but you can see there just the glorious mess that is so. There's always a part of me that hates to cover this up, all of this abstract stuff, because you know, you can't make this stuff up. You can create an environment where this can happen. That's what I've done. But you can't force these textures. They're natural, right? It's running and splashing and layering and all that kind of stuff. And that indeed does create the illusion of detail in the later stages. So yes, messy at first, neat later on. Well, this is going to be a really short broadcast, and I'm going to paint for a little while without you. And I'll bring you back in as soon as I think I'm going to say anything interesting. I've never let that stop me before. I broadcast whether I have anything to say or not, don't I? But anyway, leave me alone. Thank you again for your company. I enjoy it very much. And if you've hit the bell, then you'll be notified when I start broadcasting again. Okay? Thanks. Bye-bye.